one is remote. Unfortunately, because of carbon emission, UNFCCC didn't join us today, but maybe it's another reason. We are looking at regulations with UNFCCC. We are going to look at disruptive, innovative financing ecosystems with REGEN. We are going to look at a transformative approach from green to blue with Farm Nature. We are going to as well look at regenerative uptake when it comes to the tourists themselves with the regenerative travel. And finally, Iberostar Group is going to share with us what they have committed to in becoming net zero by 2030, how a company moves into that system. So without taking any more time, because I think time is of essence today, our first speaker is Miguel Naranjo. It's a program officer from the UNFCCC. And Miguel is going to share with us more details about the Article 6. Actually, the Article 6 of the COP27 from the Paris Agreement is outlining a regulatory framework on carbon financing. So please, can we play the video?
Hello, my name is Miguel Naranjo and I work for the UNFCCC Secretariat, also known as UN Climate Change. I have been asked to make an introduction to Article 6 of the Paris Agreement in a non-technical way. So I will do my best to do that. So Article 6 on the Paris Agreement is the one that refers to market and non-market mechanisms. Market mechanisms are those where there is generation and trading of units that represent action on climate change. The most typical units are expressed in terms of tons of CO2 or tons of carbon, and they are usually known as carbon credits. But there may be other units that can be traded, for example, kilowatt hours of renewable energy generated. But the common, most likely unit will be still in terms of tons of CO2, therefore carbon credits. And then non-market mechanisms refer to activities to reduce, avoid, or capture greenhouse gases that are not going to generate units for international trading, but that rather will bring an economic benefit, a financial benefit to the country or the party that has implemented those activities, but without the trading of units internationally. So referring first to market mechanisms, there are two types that Article 6 establishes, or two processes that allow for the generation of these units that will be traded or can be traded afterwards. And they are referred to as Article 6.2 and 6.4 of the Paris Agreement. 6.2 allows governments to develop projects bilaterally or multilaterally between several governments, but they themselves coordinate to generate the projects and then issue and transfer the units that those projects generate. So the whole process is under the control of the national governments involved. On the other hand, 6.4, Article 6.4, it establishes a centralized process under a supervisory body that will have the overall coordination of the process to generate the units and transfer them. This with the support of the UNFCCC Secretariat. So Article 6.4 establishes a mechanism that is very similar to the Clean Development Mechanism, the CDM, under the Kyoto Protocol, in case you are familiar with it. It's very similar with some improvements. So in this case, governments do not generate the projects bilaterally or multilaterally, but rather the projects are implemented under a centralized mechanism under a supervisory body. And finally, 6.8, Article 6.8 of the Paris Agreement is the one that deals with non-market mechanisms. This one still has to be defined better. It's still in the process of defining exactly what kind of projects will be accepted under projects or approaches will be accepted under non-market. However, you can think about examples such as restoration of natural areas or the implementation of policies that lead to reduction, avoidance, or capture of greenhouse gases. So, different activities that governments can perform or implement, but will not generate units to be traded internationally. Both market and non-market approaches are supposed to be complementary to each other. So this is in general terms what Article 6 deals with. In terms of companies, what it means is it opens opportunities for the generation of units to be traded under 6.2 or 6.4, or potentially to be part of policies or strategies to be implemented by national government under 6.8, both of which will support the transformation to a low carbon economy for the country, but also for the industry and the companies involved. So I hope this gives you at least a general understanding of Article 6, and we remain available to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you, Miguel. I think that this is beautifully setting the scene. Let us now explore further the opportunities that the Article 6 is providing to unlock the potential. I would like now to invite Frédéric Degray, CEO of NOAA REGEN, NOAA REGEN is a provider of integrated and innovative solutions to protect, to regenerate, and to unlock bringing value of blue carbon ecosystems through the development of the ESG blue ecosystem. Fred, can you please share with us your innovative vision and approach so that everyone can understand what we mean by ESG blue ecosystem? You have 5 minutes for your presentation. So if you want to go there is a...
Oh, shit. Sorry. Okay. Je peux utiliser ça?
Oui.
Okay, super. Okay, hi everybody. So yes, my name is Frederick. I'm the founder of NOAA. NOAA, it's an acronym meaning Network of Ocean Ambassador Headquarters. And basically what we offer is a complete ecosystem with different toolkits to support states, coastal territories, islands, into their transition in a concrete way and trying to fast track this transition for them. So basically, the first part of the toolkit deals with the legal and policy framework. We are working on climate emergency legislation with the general attorney of the countries to make it adaptable and doable for the best investment possible into their economies. Then we bring a financial ecosystem, which is a platform with multiple tools that I'm going to showcase later on. The third point is valuing their natural resources, so it's dealing with the carbon, most of it, and for sure unlocking the market of the blue carbon. And then we come with a toolkit of clean tech, how they can invest into the best strategic technologies to fast track their transition, and we pilot the scale up, the setup to the scale up, because it's very complex for the governments. So here I'm just showcasing a bit the financial ecosystem. So there is a huge market potentially to unlock, which is the blue carbon, and for this we need to prepare the financial tools to channel those funds, trace those funds, trace the carbon assets, and trade it. So we are setting up a global blue carbon bank. We have already set up a blue climate fund, and we are setting up the carbon stock exchange. So how do we believe blended finance must operate to fast track their transition is that with the climate emergency legislation, we ask those governments to reinvest their carbon, monetizing their carbon into their transition, their circular economy of the transition. Okay, so this is the way to unlock alternative funding from the private sector, because we de-risk their investment. Okay, I'm not going to be too much technical, but here it's the way we value basically the carbon opportunity for those countries. We called it Reach to Reef, which is a carbon cascade mechanism. So basically, we choose the best spot for the regeneration, mostly wetlands, riverside, and we start investing into this area as carbon farming, agroforestry, and clean techs to depollute the rivers that affect the oceans. In the same time, we ask those countries to protect the marine area in the same localization, and we audit their carbon sequestration state. And because of the investment of the green and clean techs carbon, then we believe that we are going to have the additionality of the blue. We can also audit specific areas to value the carbon sequestration, conservation, and additionality in those areas, which brings a big potential for those countries. As you can see, it's more than half of the carbon markets. And here it's an example linked to the tourism, how we're going to pilot this investment from setup to scale up. We have created NOAA Resort, which that time means Nomad Off-Grid Augmented Habitat, which is real estate development born regenerative. This is communities where people can work, can bring their kids at school, they can stay there and start investing in managing all of the clean tech development from Reach to Reef to affect in the best manner the development of those transitions. Okay, so to conclude with it, NOAA is generating a carbon cascade mechanism, unlocking the blue carbon credits, tracing all of this carbon asset and investment through a fintech, which is all into the blockchain to have the traceability, and then we contribute to the transition, empowering their economies. Basically, this is it.
Thank you, Fred.
Sorry.
We're very happy to see how we can visualize and understand better the Reach to Reef, and I think we are on the right curve and the right ascensional curve, because I think the interest of many ocean economies is already showing an incredible interest. And you know, tourism represents up to 70% in island states, for example, which are small territories, huge oceans.
Exactly.
And maybe tomorrow we are going to have an example of island states being more rich than anyone else when it comes to carbon.
Sure.
So let's hope, because it's for the benefit of people. Now, after this quite disruptive concept, we would like to hear from our next speaker, Michael Matters, a bit further on the methodologies that needs to be developed for those blue carbon credits to be of the highest standards. I think you have proven, as the founder of Farm Nature supports the creation, structuring, and management of new forms of financing mechanism to unlock and allocate financial capital for nature. I think what is very interesting in your approach is the scale that you are targeting at, because we are not there just to offset just a small trip. We are looking at a very holistic approach, and we would be very happy to hear from you.
Yes, thank you. So distinguished guests and distinguished speakers, thank you for inviting me to this wonderful conference. I'm a 20-year finance veteran, especially on climate and carbon markets, so forgive me for my brutal honesty and my passion for what I'm about to say. So I'm just going to try to simplify and try to connect the dots between what has been said in the first speech with the UNFCCC and what Fred has said. But first I'm going to explain the two main problems, and then I'm going to explain the two main solutions. So here you have the problem. On the left-hand side, you have our economy that's dependent on nature, $44 trillion every year. In the middle, you have the amount of money that's needed to fix our climate every year, $9 trillion to meet the 1.5 degree. And on the right side, it's how much you need to fix our nature, and especially our oceans. So I hope you can see what the common denominator is here. We don't need millions. We don't need billions. We need trillions. So where is that going to come from? It's not going to come from governments. It's not going to come from taxpayers. And it's certainly not going to come from the corporates. So let's think about that. So we talked, the UNFCCC person discussed about the Paris Agreement. Right now, the Paris Agreement is impossible to meet unless we fund nature. On the right side, you have the IPCC graph that states that if you don't fund nature, because it's the main sequestration power that we have, it will be impossible to meet the Paris Agreement. And on the left-hand side, it's the 54 gigatons of pollution that we put into our air. 22% of it is covered by the EU ETS and other ETS markets out there. Okay, that's called the regulated carbon markets. 0.2% is covered by the voluntary carbon markets. Think about that. So do you think that it is possible to solve the problem through voluntary actions and through voluntary carbon credits by addressing 0.2% of the problem? Any scientist and any logical person will probably tell you no. So here's the solution. The UNFCCC person discussed about it. It's called the Paris Agreement. It exists. It's there. It's the framework that allows us to issue the carbon that we need, the carbon credits that we need. He discussed about Article 6, which is actually correct. That's Article 6 that was signed at COP26 in Glasgow, basically states that we now have a market mechanism for us to use. And so we have to use it, but we have to use it with the right carbon, not voluntary carbon credits. So that's precisely why I'm here, and that's precisely why I'm working with Fred and his team, is that we need to issue sovereign carbon. I'm not going to go through all the items because I don't have time, but this is just to show you that we've done our due diligence. We've been working on this for 1 year to figure out what sovereign carbon is so that we address the problem at speed and at scale with the right carbon credits. And this is just to show you that there is a process. Once again, I'm not going to go through the process, but once again, it's to show you that we've done the due diligence on figuring out that if we did do this tomorrow, it is possible to do it through the UN system. Because it exists. It exists through RED+. RED+ is the carbon credits that is issued for reforestation and deforestation. So why can't we do this for blue oceans? It's very, very doable. And we can do this, and we can issue Blue Plus, I call it Blue Plus instead of Red Plus. We can issue Blue Plus through exactly the same mechanism. So these are my 4 slides. I'm happy to take any questions about that, but I want to end on an emotional note here. Ask yourself what you're doing here. Seriously, ask yourself what these countries are doing here. There's 196 countries there negotiating something that we already know what the problem is. The problem is not a new convention. The problem is not a new agreement. The problem is that we need capital. We need trillions of capital towards this. And I'm here to do this, and I hope you can join me and Fred and all his team to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. I think this pioneering idea on which you are already working deeply to be rooted for the future on the Blue Plus has a beautiful future.
Thank you.
We are with you. So our next speaker is Amanda Ho. She is the CEO and founder of Regenerative travel community of hotels, regenerating people and places. And I think that we are all here, and I think nothing can change without our personal commitment at different levels. here we are speaking about building the future of the Blue Plus, but we are as well speaking of the 0.2 on voluntary commitments, which maybe you can shed some light on, and how do you involve the companies and the people that are committed to climate.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Regenerative Travel. I'm excited to be here today and to share why we have to move beyond sustainability to regenerative tourism. As planes ground to a halt and the travel industry effectively came to a standstill during the pandemic, we reflected on the basic notion of why we travel and how we travel. We realized that there was an urgent call to repair and replenish the damage not only done to our environments, but our communities. How can we do things better as a travel industry? How can we make the necessary conditions to improve the conditions of life for all stakeholders through tourism? The answer is regenerative travel. From a very simplistic standpoint, being green is about doing less damage. Sustainability is actually reaching net neutrality. Regeneration is actually making it better. The travel industry as it currently operates is not sustainable. We have to move beyond sustainability, as you can see here, to reverse the negative impact and move towards a path of overall improvement. According to a recent Booking.com survey, 81% of travelers confirmed that sustainable travel is more important to them now. And 50% are now saying that after COVID, that in recent climate change news, that they are now influenced to make better and more sustainable travel choices. And 59% of travelers also say that they want to leave the places that they visit better than they arrived. It's clear that the consumer trend is changing, and we're beginning to see that more and more conscious travelers are seeking sustainable and regenerative accommodations. So how can the travel industry move towards to meet this demand? As a company, we're working now with 35 hotels around the world and starting at a property level to help deepen their impact. We have a minimum criteria that looks at whether a hotel honors sense of place, is built with local materials, is inclusive in their hiring practices, provides staff management training, how they support local communities, and we also require hotels to monitor 29 data points, looking at waste, water and energy, education, distribution, and diversity. And we help them monitor their progress over month by month. We recently partnered with the University of Edinburgh and Solomar International to produce a white paper that surveyed travel businesses across the world to understand how tourism, in the face of climate change, can support the ability of communities to thrive, support, and protect the management and restoration of nature. We examined travel businesses that were implementing nature-based solutions to climate change, and based on that research, developed this framework to understand how other travel businesses can support development of nature-based solutions. A key finding of the paper was that many regenerative hotels are developing and managing and supporting nature-based solutions, and hotels now have first-hand opportunity to make guests an active part of blue carbon efforts by creating first-hand experiences of what water and coastal ecosystems mean in practical and local terms. For many of our regenerative hotels, simply existing contributes to the active restoration of blue carbon ecosystems. Tranquilo Bay in Panama, just by being there, the mangroves are already being protected. Pla Viva in Mexico are actively funding and restoring the watershed regeneration project to ensure the quality of air, water, and soil for all those who live around the area. Hamanasi Resort in Belize is partnering with the Nature Conservancy on the funding of seaweed farming to give fishers an alternative employment. We're also seeing that the formation of marine protected areas through tourism are now playing a crucial role in regenerating ocean ecosystems and coastal communities. Manta Resort in Tanzania turned 1 kilometer of coastline into a no-take zone, where all forms of fishing are prohibited. Punta Cana in the Dominican Republic is now working with Mission Blue and Sylvia Earle and just declared a first DR Hope Spot. They actually just announced yesterday that the DR government is committed to expand its marine protected areas to 30%. Through these types of initiatives, tourism is directly supporting and contributing to systemic change within these ecosystems. To increase the impact of nature-based solutions, there needs to be better quantification and measurement. We also need to have better verification of carbon impacts of marine-based work. Really excited to announce that in support of the Glasgow Declaration, Regenerative Travel pledges to develop blue carbon ecosystems at our hotels and deliver plans aligned with these pathways to cut tourism emissions in half over the next decade. Thank you. If you want to learn more about what we're doing, please reach out to me.
Amanda, thank you very much. Very inspirational, and I think that the commitment of you and many, more than 600 signatories of the Glasgow Declaration, which has been launched and prepared by UNWTO and the Travel Foundation and UNEP. And I think we have the genesis of it here with Virginia from my team, is really supporting, I can say, these collective efforts. The introduction you made is an amazing platform for me to introduce now our next speaker, Megan. Megan Morikawa is the Global Sustainability Office Director for Iberostar Group. Iberostar is a very committed company which has pledged and committed to become net zero by 2030, if I am not mistaken. You are going to explain us how you are going to take up that challenge, and how are you going to take advantage as well of all what is currently buzzing and flying that you can capture and share with others. So please, Megan, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So to start, I want to showcase a video that describes our coastal health strategy, which we have just launched.
By 2030, all coastal ecosystems in Iberostar destinations will be in improving health. Mangroves, coral reefs, dunes, seagrasses, and beyond, helping nature thrive from the Caribbean to the Mediterranean. Here's how we're doing it. Working to reduce the impact of storms and hurricanes by harnessing the incredible power of these ecosystems to shelter our coasts. Advancing towards carbon neutrality by 2030 through protecting coastal ecosystems so that they help us mitigate climate change. Enhancing the tourism experience through maximizing beach and water quality. Improving the well-being of guests, employees, and residents with green spaces. Fostering resilient communities by enabling guests to discover new places with those that have known them for generations. This is our commitment and our promise to a world where nature thrives alongside people.
So apologies for the wind noise in the background here. So I wanted to give us a bit of an example of how a company, a multinational company, is tackling this issue at scale and through quantitative time-bound objectives. At Iberostar, our Wave of Change movement has been a part of our company only for about 4.5 years. We're a Spanish-based multinational luxury tourism resort with over 100 properties in 16 countries. And we estimated that in 2019, across all of that portfolio, our carbon footprint from not only our direct operations, but also our supply chain represented about roughly 1 million metric tons of carbon. And as a commitment that we launched in 2020, we agreed to reach carbon neutrality not only in our operations but also in our supply chain. First, by decarbonizing our operations and supply chains as much as possible, and we're very excited soon to be launching our SBTI validated commitments to tell you the scale of decarbonization necessary in a sector like hotels, which is a relatively easy to abate sector, and therefore we should be paying a lot of attention and focus to doing things like energy efficiency or making sure our refrigerant gases are under control, or looking most importantly at encouraging renewable energy transitions in our destinations. But we also recognize that by 2030, because of this commitment that also includes our supply chain, we will still have a reasonable carbon footprint, mostly from the embodied carbon from our purchased goods and services, the carbon in the apples that we serve in our buffets, the carbon in the construction materials it took to build our facilities. In fact, we estimate that roughly with our decarbonization plan, 96% of roughly 500,000 metric tons will need to be offset in order for us to reach these objectives of carbon neutrality. We could just purchase offsets that are part of a market that are in projects that have nothing to do with the destinations or technology that helps tourism to also grow and foster. But we decided that it's very important to see how we can invest in programs in our destinations, ideally in nature-based compensation that also gives other benefits to tourism. And I think that's one of the first takeaways that I want to bring to you, which is that for a business to think about measuring and offsetting and decarbonizing their carbon footprint, a carbon neutrality objective was really helpful for us because it put a price on carbon that now gives us the ability to say, well, I can invest €100 in making our footprint smaller, I can invest €100 in investing in nature protection in our destinations, and with that business case, it makes a manageable portfolio of carbon that we're able to manage by 2030. The second message that I want to take away as well is that when you are actually in the destination and you have the infrastructure to be able to sustain projects for multiple generations, our company is a family-owned company that has 3 generations of leadership and are certainly thinking of continuing that long-term perspective in a destination, then we also have the ability to think about projects that are very close to our properties that allow us to work in co-managements with the governments or payment for ecological services, or even looking at buying our own property that can facilitate, say, for example, corridors between protected areas that allow us to add to what it is that is otherwise available for the protection and restoration of nature. Because we're in these destinations, we also have additional benefits of water restoration or biodiversity protection, and it's very important, I think, for us to think about all of these additional benefits that also help to fuel regenerative tourism in the places where we're operating because of the business case of carbon neutrality. But I think most of all, one of the questions that we face is as a business that is working to decarbonize as much as possible. That means our carbon footprint will get smaller and smaller and smaller as our supply chain finds technologies on ways to become carbon free in their operations, which means that eventually our financing mechanism for needing to buy carbon credits will become smaller and smaller as well. So we need to think from the very beginning of designing these projects, what happens to these projects in 2045? What happens to these projects when we don't need to be financing as much the carbon compensation side? How can we think of alternative financing mechanisms in these nature protection projects for time to come, or look in ways in which they can enter into carbon markets? So I think this is also another perspective and an area that tourism should be engaging in and thinking about, and that we wanted to provide as an example from Iberostar to think a little bit about how those realities and big statements get basically turned into numbers and operation within our business context. Thank you very much.
Megan, thank you very much. I think that you pointed out a very important aspect of the decarbonization, which relates to 2 types of operations. Decarbonizing operations, including the supply chains, and the building new nature-based solutions. And I think that that approach is really an integrated approach. It is as well very interesting to see that some companies are moving towards a new verticality in their business model. As 50 years ago, the verticality was include the flight, the accommodation, the excursion, the transfer. Today, the verticality is including the integration of financing for regeneration of carbon. And I think that is the novelty, and I think we should go and fly with that. Thank you very much. I will now have a small round of questions for our speakers. I will start with you, Fred.
Okay.
You have presented a model that is capable of unlocking the blue carbon market. Have you already calculated the potential of this market, and why do you think it can be an impactful instrument to facilitate the transition for regenerative tourism?
Okay, so calculating the market is very complex. There is numbers between 3 trillions to 25 trillions. Roughly, Mike showcased a 8.1 trillion for the blue aspect of it. We have started to audit the potential, not in detail, but the potential of some highland states, 7 of them. One in Mediterranean, the other in the Caribbean area.
Okay.
And I can tell that for some countries, which are very small territories but huge waters area, we can potentially double their economy.
Wow.
So it's a huge market that can definitely, if well reinvested into their circular economies, they can totally become a game changer for their transition in a very quick way as soon as we are able to unlock this market. So for the regenerative of tourism, as you said, tourism and oceans are linked together. So it's funds also that we can put into regenerative tourism mechanism and brand new born regenerative brands as the one we are trying to create.
Thank you, Fred. And this is not an innocent question because I think this has been the nexus of the meeting point of our encounter and work together, because World Tourism Organization is very committed in creating a new model and a new governance for regenerative tourism through a new type of financing. I would now have a question for, you triggered my curiosity, Michael. How can we scale up the sovereign carbon?
Yeah, I'm going to keep it short because I really want to hear from the crowd.
Yeah.
No offense to just, I want the crowd to interact with us. So the simple answer is capital markets. The trillions that are out there are in the capital markets.
Okay.
So we're in due diligence at the moment with 3 global investment banks, and they're looking at sovereign carbon in a very, very serious way to basically provide that to their investors and to their clients. But there's no other way to unlock trillions of dollars every year.
Okay, thank you. Amanda, what do you think is the biggest opportunity for hospitality and tourism initiatives to create a deeper impact through blue carbon ecosystems?
We know that regenerative tourism is a huge opportunity because our hotels are already these micro ecosystems that are protecting and conserving nature. We can actually work with the governments to be able to create a deeper impact. For example, in Sri Lanka, there's $2,100 that's can save from coastal protection, because mangroves can actually help sequester the carbon, but also protect them from storm surges. So if hotels can really scale up their impact in terms of protecting mangrove ecosystems, seagrass beds, they can really help sequester a lot of carbon.
Thank you. And Megan, I have a question that is very important, I think, to integrate, because you integrated model including supply chains, because we know that 5% of the world population from between indigenous people and local community are protecting 80% of the world biodiversity. I speak about natural and cultural biodiversity. So your model, how does it contribute to that path? I mean, how is it going to be moving into that positive direction?
I think that's a great question to consider the biodiversity impacts, right? Because in the same way that we have a climate crisis, we're also facing a biodiversity crisis. And sometimes the solutions and decisions that you make are slightly different depending on how it is that you want to approach that. You're also bringing up another really great point, which is that we find the biodiversity impacts of the built environment are something very important to consider, but also biodiversity impacts within your supply chain, or kind of this unknown that is really massive when you're consuming a lot of food or consuming a lot of primary materials and goods that were manufactured in order to run your operations. So I think, in short, the answer is to take a holistic approach. You can't just aggressively go for a climate goal. You can't just aggressively go for a circularity goal. You need to think very holistically about how to integrate that together. And we're working on building out a strategy that will allow us to reach multiple goals at once. And it makes all of these really interesting moments of deciding what is the right step to make for your business with the right amount of information that you have accordingly. But a holistic approach is necessary to look at all of those simultaneously.
Thank you very much, Megan. I think this inclusive part is well going to benefit more people. That's the other part. Okay, let's go for a round of questions. I don't know how we proceed. Is there a micro? Is there anyone that wants to ask questions?
Oh, we were clear. We were clear in our message.
Okay. Okay. So if yes, please.
Wait.
The micro.
Yeah.
Hello, hello. So what do you think the solution is for finding funding that $8.1 trillion gap?
I mean, we have set up a company called Blue Carbon Lab, which is a dedicated R&D company to, let's say, organize this methodology of auditing the carbon sequestration into the wetlands and oceans. So we are on the final stage. We have a proof of concept already in place. So we are now, with the support of nature, going through the methodology that at the end we believe we're going to be able to unlock this carbon market. Without that methodology, nobody can do it. That's the reason why nobody did it yet.
Any other question? Yes.
Yeah.
There was one here.
I'm wondering which capital markets are the focus for raising either equity or debt or public-private partnerships in order to address the 8.1 billion or trillion, excuse me.
It's for me?
Or,
Yes, it's for you.
Yeah, okay. So at the moment, it's on the investment banking side, mostly on the debt part of it, not on the equity markets, simply because carbon has not become an asset class that you can trade, with the equity markets. But that's what we're working on at the moment with these three global investment banks.
And on the debt side, it's a securitized product that has a distributed portfolio of carbon exposure?
Yeah, it will become.
Which regions are you focused on?
It will be global. So it will be in South America, Africa, and Asia. These are the three continents that we will start with. And I forgot your first question. Well,
yeah, the first question was you answered, which is which capital
the securitization. Yeah. So at the moment, it's simply a carbon credit. But that's precisely what we're doing, is try to create into an asset so that you can securitize it and then include it in your clients or investors' portfolio.
And what's the timing on it and the depth and liquidity of the markets?
So the timing of issuing this, so if all goes well, if I had a big crystal ball, we would like to issue the first, they're called ITMO, so first sovereign carbon this year at the COP27 in Egypt. And the volumes that we're talking about is about 50 million tons of credits, which will hopefully equate to $1 billion. So $1 billion is nothing compared to the trillions, but you need a first trade to show to the markets how it works, how you issue it, and then how to attract other capital markets players to this important session.
Hi, my name is Sam Teicher. I'm the co-founder of Coral Vita, and we're a company that's working to scale up reef restoration through a new economic model. Shout out to Megan and Amanda. It was an amazing presentation, and they're doing amazing work. I'm curious, one of the things that I feel a lot of environmental entrepreneurs and communities have encountered in the concept of trillions of dollars, which are very much needed to be deployed, is that there's a lot of people that want to fund projects, but they also want to write big checks. And there's a lot of initiatives that have the opportunity to scale, but often need those $10,000 or $100,000 checks when people want to write $1 million or $100 million checks. And so I'm curious, in terms of, you were talking about a crystal ball, if you had a magic wand, what, for anyone who wants to field this, what can the financial institutions, the investment community do to help deploy more capital to those early stage projects that have the opportunity to solve a lot of these problems we're facing?
Do I answer that as well?
Yeah, go ahead. Michael?
Because then we can take the bottom-up approach. But so from a high-level perspective, we're talking about the NDCs, right? So I don't know where your projects are, but every country has an NDC. Within that NDC, you have carbon. You will have a carbon budget that you have to manage properly. So that's what we're talking about, how to manage the sovereign carbon properly. Then there's this thing within the NDC called the cascade. So within that cascade, the country decides, all right, well, I don't know, 10% goes to, community projects that are more like to be startups. 20% goes to, bigger projects, et cetera, et cetera. But that's really up to the country to decide what, they do with that money. And I just want to emphasize, I'm not against projects, and I'm not against conservation projects as well. I'm just addressing the global problem and how to address that global problem. And unfortunately, if you talk to any capital markets or investment banks, there's no way they can deal with 10,000 projects. And that's why I showed this graph about the 0.2% that is being addressed at the voluntary level. That's because there's just so many projects out there that it's just so difficult to do the due diligence, and it's just not. The cost is just too big for them to do. So we take the other approach, which is okay. Let's pull in the capital, and then trickle it down to the projects.
Thank you, Michael. I think that you opened just a space where I think the multilateral system has a role to play in accounting and trying to see how we can look in those projects because they exist, they are there, and the people need to do them because everybody wants to be part of the solution. We need to close, I have been told, but before closing, sorry for that, if you want to continue the conversation with us tomorrow, we will be in the Blue Zone at 1 o'clock. Today we had non-state actors. Tomorrow we will have ministers. We have the Minister of Economy of Portugal, Minister of Tourism of Kenya as well joining us, and others. So please join us tomorrow. And I hope that this has been very useful to your further thinking and future. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all speakers.